Now, Bobby Seale, the clarion call of the Black Panther Party was power to the people, and you spent certainly virtually all of your life trying to give people in the community more power and control over their lives. In the 30 years since you started the Panther Party, how much improvement have you seen in members of the black community's ability to take control over their own lives?
I got to put this in context. You know, when we came about, we were sort of in what we call the second phase of the civil rights struggle. It's a hindsight analysis. We were about, not only the Black Panther Party, SNCC in its attempt in the South, trying to evolve political electoral black community unity. That was a time when there was only, 400 maybe or so duly elected black politicians. I mean, from the federal all the way down to the Board of Education level. What we see that came out of that 60s protest movement was at the end of the 70s, we're talking about 6,000 or 7,000 duly elected black politicians. At the end of the 80s, 10,000 duly elected politicians. The problem is that it was only half a victory because hypothetically 50% of the politicians ain't worth crap, even the black ones, right? Probably 70 to 80% of the white ones are not worth crap either. My point is that was the second phase. The main thing, though, was how do we get to the economics? How do we evolve a new economic practice that makes some human sense? And that is the area, you see. Now, we can talk about and measure from the 60s with the Kerner report, when they spoke of what 2, 3, 4% blacks were of the educated property owner class, etc. And if we measure with the basic medium income and the levels of discriminations and lack of fair shares access to education, what have you, and jobs, at the time we made, well, there's been some changes. On the other end, we can look at Black America particularly, and we can see 25% of the African American community with less than $5,000 income a year.
Now, as I understand, I mean, the two foundations of the Black Panther Party was self-defense and self-reliance, self-help. But with the passage of time, I mean, so much of the Black Panthers have become just the self-defense side. The black berets, the clenched fists, the guns, and that we seem to have forgotten, or there hasn't been the same attention paid to the literacy programs, the breakfast programs, the self-help and the community programs. Why is that, you think?
That's because when we said that we would defend ourselves if we're attacked by any races, I mean, that captures everybody's imagination.
It's a little bit more exciting than breakfast in a bag, I guess.
We were reacting to the several years preceding that period, preceding October 1966 when we created the Black. We were reacting to all of the brutality that had been launched on the peaceful demonstrators. Remember, Hewitt was in Knight Law School, and the constant reference, as Hewitt used to say, every time they jump on the peaceful demonstrators, they're violating the First Amendment of the Constitution because it clearly states that all of them have a right to peacefully redress and peacefully assemble, and they only peacefully assemble. Now Bull Corner and the racists are jumping on them, therefore they're violating their constitutional rights, they're violating the law of the land. This was Huey Newton. So when we came along looking at this for several years, we started, he says, oh, we're going to stand for self-defense. If you attack us, we'll shoot back. But we did it by law. We were so damn legal when we went out to patrol the police and observe the police with the legal guns. We knew all the laws on that. It blew the cops' mind. The fact that we knew all our civil rights laws. And
the fact, I guess, carrying an unconcealed weapon was completely lawful.
Loaded, unconcealed. Remember, I was in the military, so the youth was trained. I had Albert Howard, big man Albert Howard. He helped me because he was in the military, so we would train them with the weapons. All these particulars we trained them before we went to the patrol. It blows the cops' minds that Huey could articulate these points of law. He could pull out some Supreme Court ruling particular related to the such and such amendment, this is due process law in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, therefore you cannot touch my private property, therefore move back, do not, and the black people in the community saying, damn, what kind of mess is this? They never seen it. So their imaginations were being captured. Literally we realized the policeman's imagination was being captured. Literally we realized the whole nation's imagination was being captured. Literally we realized when I took the delegation to Sacramento, armed delegation in the California State Legislature, when they're trying to make this law against us carrying loaded weapons in city limits, it captured the imagination of the whole world. We didn't know this was going to happen.
Did it capture it, though, to the detriment of the other good work the Panthers were doing in the community?
What happens is that this was only in a 6-month period. We hadn't even got to the Breakfast Children program didn't start till '68. The health clinics.
Oh, really?
That's the point.
So all the focus on the Sacramento march.
Right. We were a ragtag little group. Before Huey went to jail, there was never any more than 75 people who had been through the party. When I went to California State Legislature, I had 24 males and 6 females, and maybe 5 or 6 other party members who had jobs they had to go to. This is what we had in the first 6 months. But we got this international notoriety. We were like a social evolutionary accident in the middle of an ongoing civil human rights protest that was already there. And we put civil rights right on the cutting edge, civil human rights protests right on the cutting edge. And so we got that notoriety for that before the preventative medical health care clinics, before sickle cell anemia checks, free breakfast programs, free food programs, senior citizen safe programs, taking the senior citizens back and forth so they wouldn't be mugged and stuff. Before these programs. And then later we ran, in late '68, we ran for political office. I ran on the ballot. Kathleen Cleaver was named on the ballot, Eldridge Cleaver, and we put Huey Newton's name on the ballot while he was sitting in jail. Later in 1972, after myself being a political prisoner in jail without bail for 2 years, I won the cases. And I ran for political office again as the mayor of Oakland, but we didn't make it. But by the time I got ready to run for mayor of Oakland, the Central Committee voted that I was going to do so in January of '72. There were no more physical attacks on our offices. 28 was already dead. We won 95% of all the courtroom cases that we've been in because we have one of the most profound legal teams. Give that credit to Huey because Huey was in that vein of thinking of understanding the whole legal ramifications.
Another image that I think a lot of people still have of the Panthers is with those little red books, the Chairman Mao books.
That's interesting. Because a lot of times, like, people are writing that this was the ideological base of the Black Panther Party. Not true.
Yeah, see, I was wondering, that's my question, is how important was ideology to the Panthers?
Well, ideology originally from the Black Panther Party grew out of us understanding African and African-American people's history of struggle for that. I mean, I was chock full of information from '64 to '66. I'm saying that by the time we ran into this red book, it was just a thing. Right after we had escorted Sister Betty Shabazz, we might have been 4 or 5 months old. He says, "Hey man, how much money you got?" And remember, we still a ragtag organization. I don't know, $70, $80, man. Come over, I know how we can raise some money to pay rent and buy some more shotguns. Next thing I know, in my car, Hugh didn't have a car. We were headed to the China bookstore in San Francisco, some obscure location. We get over there and they said, you can buy these red books for 25 cents individually. If you buy them in a pack, you buy for 20 cents. I said, we'll buy 2 packs. So we bought 50 red books. We went back up to Sadler's Gate, University of California. We hadn't even read these things. We knew they were popular in the media because the media would show millions of people holding up Chairman Mao's red book in China. So here we are, 5 or 6 of us. Get your red book, $1, and they were going like hotcakes.
White liberal college students.
Get your red book, $1. We have not read this thing. We run back to the China bookstore and buy these guys out, man. We buy 200, 300 books and sell them out. We run book, buy some shotguns, pay some utilities and some rent. The next day we're doing the same thing. Finally, we heard about a big anti-war rally 3 weeks later at Kezar Stadium in San Francisco. I mean, they must have, what, 25,000 people in this anti-war rally. We left the guns at home. We went in there with a couple of thousand red books. We still have not read this book. We go in and sell red books for $1. Then, I guess a little bit after Denzel Dow's situation in North Richmond when he got killed by a policeman, Huey and I happened to be sitting in my house and said, hey man, there's some nice stuff in here. Look, you do not steal not a needle and a piece of thread from the people. We got to reading this thing. So we adopted these little aspects out of the Red Book, and I made little rules out of them, not necessarily per se the Red Book. But the Red Book is a form of required reading for the Black Panther Party members. I never implemented that till my organization started growing like wildfire. It says everybody got to read the Red Book. That was in 1968, after Martin Luther King was killed. See, because after Martin Luther King was killed,
that's when
our organization swelled from 400 members to 5,000 members in a matter of 6 months. Grew almost too fast, but I kept up with it. But that's when the Red Book became part of a lot of required reading. Because prior to that, You had to read W.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction, Basil Davidson, even Blues People, the autobiography of Malcolm X. I had a list of about 25, 30 books one had to read that had largely to do with African-American people's history of struggle. W.B. Du Bois gave us this very rather class analysis of what the situation was as it related to the color line and as the color line related to the class analysis, but coming from really an African-American perspective. So the real ideological approach evolved out of that. Red book and stuff was secondary. Then, of course, in 1968, we got a handful of Marxist-Leninists come in the party. Then they clashed with me a bit because some of them are trying to argue the Soviet Union state-controlled command economy socialism. I says, bull crap, I don't like it. What do you mean? I says, if you're going to argue dialectics, over here you have the avaricious, racist, corporate monopoly capitalists. You're saying that the antithesis to this is Russia's Politburo, state-controlled command economy socialism. What about us, the people, can be in control? This is about power to the people. Our slogan is all power to all the people. So later for some Politburo, later for some corporate money rich, we need to get down here, and this is the true synthesis. That was my argument in the late 60s.
So the rank and file Panthers weren't ideological, they weren't?
Yes, they were. They were very ideological. They were ideological, but I was the key in central political education.
Well, your 10-point program, I know, was instilled.
That was it, but it was beyond that. We went beyond that 10-point program. In many cases, you had party members trying to read the four works of Mao Zedong, reading Che Guevara. But what I would do was show the party members that they don't necessarily apply in an overdeveloped, fast-paced, high-tech social order. That we're living in a different situation. So you're not living in the rural, you're not living in the woods and the hills, you're living in the urban. So I was high-tech anyway, you know, Gemini missile program way before, and architect, United States Air Force, high-tech. So I understood that relationship. I related more, even when after I studied my African history, I related more to the mineral resources in the bowels of the earth of Africa rather than whether or not I'd wear a dashiki. See, so the aesthetic was secondary.
Right.
And I'm dealing with the need, how do black people control more of the mineral resources in the bowels of the earth so they can have a decent standard of living and more community control of the political, economic, and social justice institutions that affect their lives.
Now, with the passage of time, it's become absolutely crystal clear that, in fact, the FBI did have a program of undermining the activities of the Panther Party. And in fact, I think the Senate Select Committee on Government Intelligence Activities in '76 said the FBI engaged in lawless tactics against Black Panther Party and responded to deep-seated societal problems by fomenting violence and unrest. I mean, pretty tough indictment of a central agent of government. Yet it's interesting, I've read in your works that you don't believe that it was the FBI and only the FBI that was responsible for the demise of the Panther movement.
What I call the final demise is a difference. I'm not going to take the FBI off the hook. They've violated our constitutional rights. I think Wesley Swearingen, with his recent book, FBI Secrets, Southern Press published that, exemplifies that. He's an FBI agent who's revealing real murder tactics, particularly John Huggins and others. Now, the FBI violated our rights. They fermented that split between Eldridge Cleaver and Huey Newton, all of that. Now, let's get me into the fall of '73. Elaine Brown is running around telling little lies on people so she can get close to Huey. I think somebody said this about you, Chairman, servant, and they disrespecting you. And one day, Huey, beginning to snort cocaine, abusing that, jumped on a rank-and-file party member and beat the hell out of him. A whole herd of 100 and some odd party members just left. Who the hell he think he is? And people were peppering off because of this kind of crap. I'm jamming you. We put you in the hospital twice behind abusing those drugs. We had Dr. Small. I mean, we actually put him in the hospital. I'm not trying to take away Huey's early contribution. I'm telling the truth of what happened.
Right.
You need to know the whole truth. If you only have a half a truth, it's the biggest lie in the world. This is what happened in the real demise in late '73 and early '74. In May of 1974, I discovered Huey Newton is trying to take over the drug trade. We've bundled down to 250
in Oakland now.
Oakland, San Francisco, Oakland, Barrett. That's the only branch and chapter operation going, except for a skeleton crew with a free ambulance program in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. There's no Chicago. All the chapters have been broken down. They don't exist anymore behind that Mayoralty campaign. So now you see the real demise that's beyond COINTELPRO. unless Huey Newton and Elaine Brown was working for COINTELPRO. See, so this is the trouble with so many party